fantastic, another rhythm game sequel. Not that I thought too much going into it. Announced like 2 weeks after RB4 was, well, everyone basically made the same jokes as each other. Sega CD much? But I knew in my heart of hearts that I would have to get it. In fact, I was sworn to get both games. And why is that? Because Gary Clark Jr. was in both of them, and I will follow wherever that man goes. You know, I saw the last 3 minutes of Bright Lights live once, when that was the only song of his I knew, and I'd have to say not catching the rest of that performance is my life's biggest regret. But yeah, 2 weeks after RB4 came out, I got the chance to play the other next evolution in rhythm gaming. And as someone who is poking fun at the FMV alongside everyone else, what do I think of GHL? Well, let's start off with that guitar, I guess. Going from 5 buttons to 6, or depending on your perspective, 3x2, the new controller has a body modelled after the GH5 guitar, but is quite a bit smaller. That extends to the buttons, and not having your fingers trip over themselves takes some getting used to, but they're well designed and have just the right amount of click to them, and the divide between black and white is quite smooth, meaning it isn't a hassle to pull off those bar chords. Something that doesn't really have the right amount of click is the strum bar. At first I was worried it would be way too small, but grip isn't actually an issue with the guitar. No, the problem with the strum bar is that it is loud. I'm pretty sure it makes more noise than my Ion drum kit. Certainly this is the loudest I've had to have the TV while playing a game, and the few times I've had to alt strum makes for quite the cacophony of clackety clack. The only other real problem I have with the guitar is the whammy bar. It's mechanically fine, but functionally next to useless. You can't use it to get more star power, hero power, because you can only get it in set chunks by playing a designated set of notes. At that point it's only used for altering pitch, or just making the entire sound fuzzier in GHTV, so it's basically useless and only there to remind us of the old games. The auxiliary buttons are all fine, and the hero power button being as big as it is has always made the GH5 guitar one of my favourites, but the method for connecting the guitar is a bit strange. There's no native compatibility with the X-Bone, instead you have to use a USB dongle to connect it. I guess if you're on the PlayStation this is nothing new, but as someone who has been running for Team Gates when it comes to rhythm games, it was a little alien. Plus the dongle is tiny and seems really easy to misplace. A real tone cable this is not. Shut up Connor. As a fellow veteran and connoisseur of Guitar Hero of yore, how does it actually play? Fine? If you can figure out where black and white are in relation to each other and keep that burned into your brain in under 30 minutes, then you'll be better at this game than me, because that was the biggest hurdle going into GHL. After the first set of tutorial songs, I threw myself into the game on expert, ready to lose. Certainly it takes a while to get used to, coming from shifting your hand to hit different patterns on a horizontal plane, to having to manage differing vertical and horizontal inputs at the same time. But I actually quite like it a lot. Managing 2 different planes of input makes for an interesting challenge, and because there's a far greater reliance on how you hit certain button combos in order to get the right shapes, it can make even the most chordy songs seem completely fresh. And it makes for a pretty good learning curve, because songs with quick chord switches seem like they're always going to be interesting. I guess an honest gripe I have with the controls is that open strums aren't used nearly enough. When they're melded with all the other patterns, they tend to make for some of the best songs in the game, and the songs without them can, as a result, still have some weird rapping issues. On top of that, if you're a hardy veteran, there is probably going to be a bit of a barrier for entry. I knew going straight into expert would be kind of a bad idea, but you really have to throw out a lot of what you know about Guitar Hero. A lot of people attribute this to there being no 4th set of buttons, and thus no pinky usage, but my playstyle was so unorthodox I never used the pinky anyway. But you have to pay attention to where on the vertical plane your finger will land on the controller, particularly if you're combining a bar chord on one button with something else. So it's not just a matter of hitting the buttons, but making sure you're lining your fingers up properly so you can transition with any sort of grace. Plus, the fact there's no position shifting as there used to be, and thus the fact your fingers are going to be cloistered together the entire time, means it's much more physically taxing over long periods. I took out the entire career in 2 or 3 sessions because I wanted to see all the FMV, but by the end I felt so overwhelmed and tired that the final song completely kicked my ass. Sometimes the crowd, the loud music, the interface, the eccentricity of the entire experience would make me lose my focus, and I'd start getting very bad at the game.
Listen to that video crowd! They hate you!
The weird thing is, I actually didn't mind this all that much. Being kind of thrown into this new rhythm gaming experience was unique enough a trip and balanced enough on its own that the career was pretty much enjoyable from beginning to end, just in the sense that it was a rhythm game with a funky new control scheme. That actually makes it quite an accomplishment, because a cursory glance at the setlist might have you believe it's complete garbage. Yeah, it's another modern music deluge. Okay, I think I should clarify something. I'm not one of those YouTube curmudgeons who thinks all modern music is bad because it uses auto-tunes or teeny boppers or whatever. I mean, I used to be, but when I say I'm not huge on both of these games being filled with modern music, I don't want it to sound like if it has the numbers 201 whatever in its date, I arbitrarily hate it. Something that made me nervous for both of these games is that what's gotten popular has increasingly headed in the direction of the laid back, and in some respects, artificial. Taylor Swift has gone from acoustic-laden country to heavily produced and fine-tuned synth pop, which is not bad in itself. It just made me wonder how much music I hear on the radio could actually move with grace into these games that are mostly about emulating the guitar, and it's definitely spilled over into GHL a little bit. I mean, for one, there are probably like 5 guitar solos on the disc, and one of them is in the Rihanna song, which is hilarious. And for another, Skrillex. Yes, playing this is as ridiculous as you'd imagine, but the setlist is way better in execution than it looks on paper. Playing through the game revealed that most bands were still on the rockier side of the spectrum, and it felt much more deliberate and specific than just picking songs from every genre for the sake of picking songs from every genre. Can you tell I hate this song yet? That said, this means they had to go under the radar for a pretty decent number of picks, and I feel so out of touch because I didn't immediately recognise at least a third of the songs I was playing. Plus the whole modern bent means you have to stomach some Imagine Dragons and One Republic, the latter of which featuring probably the most awful chart I've played in a long time. But most of the songs are fun in some capacity and varied within themselves. I don't know if it's a great set list, but it's good, it works. Won't get fooled again as butchered though. Sad face. Okay, let's talk about that FMV. Now, when I was in university and taking a game design course as an elective, I did throw around a vague idea of a game where the audience would properly react to your performance, your interface would shift to be more immersive in case you were interrupted in some manner, and maybe you could even play different shows depending on which path you chose. That last one obviously happened in Rock Band 4, the first one is what Guitar Hero Live is all about, and the middle one didn't really happen at all. But yeah, I did foresee someone taking at least a superficial stab at trying to capture the experience of playing shows rather than just playing songs. And certainly the first person aspect was an obvious move. How well does it all work? Well, if I stop asking myself rhetorical questions in a poor attempt to find a linking sentence, I will tell you. The techniques they used to emulate a full stadium crowd seem pretty spot on. The crowd is always alive, unless you're being bad of course, and there are crowd sing-alongs for just about every song. Granted, a world where The Kill by 30 Seconds to Mars is this raucous anthem to sing along to is not a world I really want to live in, but they do get the effect across. Seeing the crowd jump and wave in unison definitely portrays the spirit of these events, and one time I was booed at the end of the song, I actually yelled, "Okay, so I missed some open chords at the end, so what, shut the hell up." And yeah, there's definitely a cringe factor, but honestly I find that to be half the fun. Seeing which audience members are hamming it up the most or acting the most stupid always puts a grin on my face. And failing a song to see how everyone boos you or eggs you on is almost worth going through the career twice for. I'm serious, I want to see what happens when you fail every song. This is partially why I said this game doesn't really remind me of Guitar Hero. It reminds me more of the last stage of Parappa the Rapper, but like 40 times over. All that said, I still have quite a few problems with this setup. Between the lighting, the crowds, and the scale, it certainly captures the energy of a live performance, but not necessarily the presence or the personality. The fake bands on offer are a grab bag of different genres and stereotypes, but the presence of this supergroup at the end of the game was probably meant to mean I should have known the bands and all their members. But none of these bands are all that unique in their own right, and it was pretty clear throughout the entire thing that these people are just actors. I mean, maybe they're also musicians in real life, but in the context of this game it's pretty clear they're just acting. They don't really seem to play to the crowd as much as they should, and I never got that sense of spontaneity that gives most of the revered live shows their identity. The performances the bandmates give seem pretty typical and never really stand out, and whenever they look at your character it's pretty obvious they're just looking at a camera to try and achieve some stage presence. That's a whole other can of worms. From your point of view, you'll see your character's hand receive and switch guitars all the time, but you never actually see them playing it on stage. I expect expected, nay, hoped, that they would actually look at the neck during a solo or tricky breakdown. I mean, everyone else in this game does that, but the fact that whoever you are playing as does not really destroys any semblance of immersion. It's obvious from the way the view just wanders around without any sort of real cue that it's just a cameraman. I mean, you remember that stage dive from the reveal video? Now, I've never done this myself, hard to believe, I know, but the way he just kind of glides off the stage, there's no way this is an accurate portrayal, is it? They don't really interact with other band members, they just look to see if they're getting the thumbs up or not. Your character is such a non-entity, so much so that they don't even show up in these unlockable biographies of the bands. So who the hell are you playing as? You can't be playing as the same one person the entire time, because some bands are playing at the same time, just on different stages. So are you playing as a different stand-in each time? Because I find it hard to believe that every band would need some session musician to fill in for, of all roles, lead guitar. And yes, this is absolutely a big deal for me. When you go to a live show, chances are you're not just going to see a band live, you're going to see a particular band live and their particular antics. And if they didn't have those senses of personality, then what the hell would be the point? This is precisely why cover bands don't go anywhere, and without those strong ties to the performances, the live portions of GHL feel good in a moment, but I didn't really have any inclination to revisit them once I had finished a career. Of course, this is just one half of the game. GHTV is comprised of a staggering amount of charts set to music videos, and the main mode of play is picking a quote-unquote channel and playing whatever comes up alongside everyone else currently playing. This works pretty well. Playing whatever comes down the pipe is pretty liberating, and the fact it's completely random, meaning it doesn't even have ties to what's in your library, means it's a pretty effective vehicle for finding new songs entirely. I mean, I felt so out of touch the one time I was on for a full half hour, but a new way to experience music is generally appreciated. And even when you come across an old song, the new control scheme makes revisiting it worth it. There's also a free-to-play element where playing songs on the channel gives you coins that you can trade in to get plays, where you actually use them for a one-time play of a song you choose. This whole streaming setup is probably the way to go when you have an interface as ultimately utilitarian as this, but it should go without saying I haven't had a problem with buying songs wholesale up to this point, and I'm not really ready to jump onto the idea of no permanent ownership. Honestly, I'm totally fine with playing songs at random for the ability to pick songs I like, simply because the catalogue is more than big enough to facilitate it, but if I were better at the game, I would really appreciate a way to permanently own some of these so I can play them at will. Clearly, this streaming setup is not for me. It's for a more casual mindset. It's for people who want to enjoy the experience of Guitar Hero without the stress of license ownership, but there's still a handful of more hardcore features I really want to see. Obviously, the fact you never own songs and can't really bend them to your will means there is no practice mode, yada 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 literally 10 years ago. But on top of this, there's also no hyperspeed, which seems like it's going to have to be patched in for those top tier upper echelon tracks. The leaderboards also seem kind of sloppy at the moment. There don't seem to be a whole bunch of filters and sorts at the moment, but there are filters for the quick play part of GHTV. They're just broken right now for some reason. One mode I also want to draw attention to is GHTV Premium, where you pick a set list of songs and compete with others to earn bonuses you can use on other songs. I guess? This mode honestly threw me for a loop, but there is one reason you'd want to play this. Recognize these names? See? They didn't completely forget the classic characters. Ahem. I wish I could tell you how bullshit or not the free-to-play elements are. The power-ups seem kinda suspect, because I can guarantee that's going to be the point of contention for a lot of people. But I didn't really get far into this mode because of the problem that I've kind of been tiptoeing around for the entire review. The calibration. When it came to RB4, I just kind of threw up my hands, said, well, it works for me, and couldn't really attribute it to anything. With GHL, I can say I've had extreme difficulty getting it to work, and I can attribute it to something. When I started the game and got the prompt to calibrate video only, I knew it was a bad omen. Guitar Hero 2 had video only, and it's unplayable. Rocksmith has video only, and it's unplayable. Guitar Hero Live has video only, and it's not unplayable. The reason I didn't mention it was because I was having a lot of fun in live despite this, but when I hit GHTV, my patience with it and thus my enjoyment came to a dead halt. Even the automatic game calibration didn't seem to work, and I'm totally ready to attribute it to a lack of audio calibration alongside video calibration. And calibration, I mean, it's kinda one of the most important things to get right in one of these games, you know? Which is a shame, because I was ready to call this game a fun, if lightweight, slice of modern rhythm gaming, but I guess the end quote will have to be closer to Get it when it's cheaper and more playable. I guess I should also mention this game has vocals, but honestly don't waste your time. The amount of screen real estate it gets is so small, and the fact there's no real solo impetus to sing is a real turn off. It's basically only a party feature, which is also a shame, because it could have been a tangible part of the package and added a lot of value to the game. Maybe both of these big issues will be patched later on, but whatever, I'm done with rhythm games. I'm not gonna look at anymore. No more rhythm games this year, I say. Fuck. Also, this barkeep, whoever they are and whatever their gender is, they're really cute.